Welcome, everyone. How exciting are you to be here to hear about some ketogenic diet stuff from Carole Freedman. Carole Freedman is a certified nutritionist and a keto diet implementation expert. After a disabling car accident in 2014 with little hope for recovery, Carole discovered the potency of a ketogenic diet for extraordinary healing. Since then, she's created the Fast Track to Keto Success program and has had tremendous success teaching people from around the world how to harness the power of a well-formulated ketogenic diet to transform their health and to achieve lasting weight loss. Let's give a warm round of applause to Carole Freedman.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you, Deanne, for that warm, that custom intro that you made yourself. I appreciate that. All right, I will try to make this as interesting and as fun. I have packed as much as possible into the talk here. So, ketosis is the lost metabolic state for optimal metabolic and gut health. So you might be wondering, like, did I pick the right talk? I've got a few choices right now. So you know you're in the right place if you're passionate about healing and you want to know about any and all safe and effective therapies that could transform the health of your patients or for yourself. You're also in the right place if you're at NTP or NTC or any other type of healthcare practitioner that is frustrated by trying to implement diets with your patients with slow or no results, low compliance, especially in treating obesity, diabetes, prediabetes, hyperlipidemia, allergies, autoimmune, list goes on and on and on. You're also in the right place if you've heard really great stories about health transformations with the keto diet, but you're still a little skeptical and you're ready to learn a little bit more. You're also in the right place if you've tried a keto diet or you're ready to try a keto diet before implementing it with your patients, but you're confused, you're overwhelmed, and you're unsure of the right way to do it. And you're also in the right place if you're a healthcare practitioner and you're struggling with cash flow, you're looking for a safe and effective therapy to add to your practice, that you can add some additional income, 5 or 6 figures over the next year. So who am I? My name is Carole Freedman, and I have a double master's from Bastyr University, both in nutrition and clinical health psychology. I also got my undergrad there in nutrition, and I have a certification in clinical hypnotherapy. Don't worry, I'm not going to be doing any hypnosis today. Other training, Deanne and I actually went to school together. So, and then Washington State, my credentials, I'm a certified nutritionist and a registered hypnotherapist. What are you going to learn today? I'm going to share with you what is ketosis and why it's this lost metabolic state. And then also, how is it that we got to this point where approximately 70 to 80% of our current population is already insulin resistant? And I'm going to present to you insulin resistance as the most probable cause of most of the common chronic diseases and symptoms that you'll see in your patients. And then also these 5 key health benefits of ketosis, and I'm going to give you one bonus one as well. And the basics of a well-formulated ketogenic diet, as well as clinical applications and some contraindications. So my promise to you is that I've packed as much information as I can into this talk. And for those of you that want to talk to me more, want to know how to take things further, I will tell you how to do that. So I have a lot to cover, so just hold all your questions to the end. If we have time, I'll get into that too. So how did I find a ketogenic diet? Well, it started with this horrible car accident. But before I tell you that story, I've got to go back even further. If I'm going to tell you the whole story of how I found keto, it actually kind of started back in 2007 when I started at Bastyr. I spent 5 years there, finishing up my bachelor's and then getting a double master's program. And so during that time, there was a bit of change in my body, you can notice there. Now, Part of that was the stress of being in school for 5 years. But also, while I was there, I was learning how diets don't work. And you should never put anybody on a diet to lose weight, because all you're going to do is make them feel terrible, miserable, tired, and hungry, and they're going to gain the weight back plus more. And so I embraced what I was learning there: health at every size, intuitive eating, mindful eating, and you can see how that was working for me. I come from a long history of diabetes and a lot of other issues. And so all foods fit, never restricted any foods. I had the misconception that I was healthy. And I graduated and I opened my practice. And I'll be frank, I was a fat nutritionist. And it took that horrific car accident to open my eyes to something that actually works really well. So I was hit by a distracted driver going approximately 35 miles an hour, did not even tap on her brakes, and you can't tell there, but I'm actually in the car, so this is immediately after the accident. Please don't Facebook and drive, don't text and drive. We're coming up on, actually tomorrow is the 3-year anniversary of this accident. And immediately after the accident, I had crush injuries to my legs. I was bedridden for about 3 months after that. Constant chronic pain. I developed something called chronic regional pain syndrome. If anybody here has heard of that, you know this is disabling and chronic, and it doesn't get better. So I had severe edema in my legs, extraordinary burning pain, hypersensitivity to touch, and like I said, I was bedridden for 3 months from this. Now, I started to be able to get back to work slightly about 8 months after the car accident, but that's when the symptoms of post-traumatic hypopituitarism hit. So this was something wrong with my brain. So pituitary controls all your endocrine glands, and it ends up with a really long list. And so I thought it was bad before, but it got even worse at this point. So this gives you symptoms of adrenal fatigue, constant lightheaded dizziness, migraines that were lasting 6 days. I was intolerant to light and sound, having memory problems, cognitive problems. When I would speak, the words would be all jumbled up. When I would try to type, the words would be jumbled as well. Extreme hypoglycemia. I also had this weird chronic low-grade fever. I couldn't sleep at night. I could only sleep during the day. My blood pressure was skyrocketing. And the list goes on. And I had a bunch of digestive problems, constantly hungry, craving carbs. Oh, and I'm getting a swirly ball here that's thinking. It's not responding to my clicks here. So I can see my next slide, though. So I will just keep talking as if the slide is changing. So I turned to nutrition. So bedridden for 3 months again at this point from all of these symptoms. And we'll have tech challenges, and I'll just do the rest of the presentation I've clicked to change, and I'm just getting a swirly ball that it's thinking about it and trying to do it. So, all right, so I will just keep going with, I wonder if I do it by hand, if it's gonna, nope, it's frozen. So 3 months in bed, I started doing a lot of research, and ultimately I ended up putting all my symptoms into a Google search. And I came up with this post-traumatic hypopituitarism. But even then, the doctors didn't know what to do for me. And so I turned back to my roots. It's like, I truly believe that if you give your body what it needs, it can heal. And I thought, what do I know about nutrition that will help my brain heal? And I remember just briefly in school learning about a ketogenic diet as being something that was effective for epilepsy. And I thought, well, epilepsy is something that's not right in the brain. Perhaps a ketogenic diet might help me as well. So I dived into the research and I started reading. The more I read, the more excited I got. And I embarked on it just as a way to heal my brain. But the surprise I got was that my entire body transformed. Within days, my symptoms started to subside. And the longer that I was on it, the more health benefits I got. And there's some really cool pictures I want to show you so you can see. So I'm trying to not spoil the surprise too much for you until you can see them. But Is it going to cooperate now? Okay, let's see if I can quickly go through here and take us back. So this is repetition. When you're teaching, it's good to go over things more than once. So we're almost there. All right, so here's a list of the researchers that I looked to and I started reading information on. And so, take a snapshot of that if you want to look up some of the research on this. But we don't have time to go through all of it. There's tons and tons of research on it. So I gained hope. And I committed 90 days. Thought, I'm going to give this a fair shot. And I wasn't somebody who was good at restricted diets in the past, but I was really desperate. So I committed. And within days, my symptoms started to subside. Within 2 weeks, I had a 62% reduction in my CRP. So I was at a 10 for my HSCRP before. It went down to I think it was like 2.69 or something within 2 weeks. And I stopped measuring then because it was getting so much better. The migraines were gone. The chronic pain in my legs was gone. I had boundless energy, normal appetite and digestion, fantastic sleep, normal blood pressure again. Basically, all of my symptoms went away that came from that car accident, but then I got even more. So 10 inches off my waist in 6 months, as well as about 60 pounds lost. I no longer qualified for metabolic syndrome, so I was no longer a nutritionist practicing nutrition with metabolic syndrome. I now had figured out how to heal myself. And the lifelong depression that I'd suffered from had lifted. And the list goes on and on and on. Things just kept continuing to improve. And so, needless to say, I became captivated and passionate about keto and have been guest on podcasts as an expert. You can find me all over social media as Keto Carole. And I just got a book deal as well. So coming out later this year, you'll see my book. I've also created some programs. So I have a client program that's a 9-week intensive program. And I have a couple of practitioner training programs as well. And so let's get into what you really want to know, why you're really here. So what is ketosis? And I present this as a lost metabolic state. But first, just quickly, I'm going to go through the most common myths about keto. And maybe some of you here believe these. So as I go through these, if you're like, yeah, I'm kind of worried about that one, raise your hand. So ketosis is dangerous. You need to be really careful with it. And even if you go into it, you don't want to stay in it your whole life. How many have heard that one? Nope, it's not true. People often get it confused with a word called ketoacidosis, which it's a different word. It's got the same beginning and end, and so people often think it's the same thing. But ketoacidosis is a state where your blood sugar's high and ketones are high. We only see it in uncontrolled type 1 diabetics or somebody who's a chronic alcoholic, especially with binge drinking. So on a ketogenic diet, our blood sugar is going to be low, and so it's impossible to get into ketoacidosis following a ketogenic diet. Here's another myth. Have you heard this one? A high-protein diet, it's bad for you. It's bad for the planet. Anybody heard that one? Okay, yeah. Well, it turns out that ketogenic diet is not a high-protein diet. It's actually a moderate to low-protein diet. So it's not bad for our kidneys. It's not bad for our planet. How about this one? Our brains need 130 grams of carbs per day to even stay alive. You heard that one? I'd be passing out right now, and my son as well that's in the audience too, if that was true. It turns out that is only true if you're eating a lot of carbohydrates. Our brain can use alternate fuel sources. Guess what? It can use ketones. Additionally, we don't need to eat 130 grams of carbs per day. Our body can make the carbohydrates that we need to live on. We need carbs for energy. I'm an athlete. I need carbs. Anybody heard that one? Yeah. Well, it turns out that, when you're dependent on carbs, you need constant refueling with carbs. But we're seeing a lot of athletes now switching over to ketogenic diets because it actually provides superior fuel source. When your body can run on fat, there's nearly an endless supply that's there. You don't have to be feeding every 2 to 3 hours. And probably of great interest to you all that are here, especially for this conference about gut health, we need lots of fruits and veggies for fiber and antioxidants and GI health. How many heard that one? So ketogenic diet isn't good for the GI health. Well, I'm not going to spend a lot of time going over this because I got a lot more slides for you that are going to talk about the gut health of how keto supports gut health really well. And this one goes with the first one. You can't stay on ketogenic long-term because it's dangerous. This one is also not true. We have healthcare practitioners that have been implementing this people for more than 20, 30 years. And so it's very safe. Also, you can't stay on a keto diet because it's highly unpalatable. Nobody can stick with that. It's gross. It tastes gross. Oh. Bacon, butter, steak, avocado, greens, extra butter on that, coconut oil. It's so gross. It's so disgusting. Now, the reason that this myth is out there, and you can find research that says, like, well, it was really effective, especially in kids with epilepsy, but it was hard for them to stick with it because it just was really highly unpalatable. The reason that's so was that this was back when fat was bad, and the type of fat that was safe and healthy for you was things like soybean oil and canola oil. Well, this was even before canola oil. And so these poor little kids, they were putting on a 90% fat diet. The way to get their fat that high, because you couldn't eat butter or steak even, was that they would make milkshakes from corn oil or soybean oil and make them drink that. That's highly unpalatable. But the way that we know to do keto now, especially we get this great time when there's so many great chefs out there and the merging that with real whole foods, it's very palatable. And the other one that people told me, my cohort, when I came out of the closet as a ketogenic dieter, my cohort all told me like, oh, you're gonna ruin your metabolism, you're just gonna gain all the weight back. I was like, well, yeah, if I go back to eating a high carb diet, I'm gonna gain the weight back, but I'll talk a little bit about how a ketogenic diet actually gives you a metabolic advantage. It's the one way of losing weight that doesn't slow down the metabolism. Should I pose? Oh no, I'm gonna swirly ball again, no. All right, so what's my next one? Kevin's my hero today, so. My next, let's see. So next I'm gonna talk about, well, what is ketosis? You keep using this word. I don't think it means what you think it means. No. Princess Bride? No. So let's see. Okay, see if I can go by memory here. I've got to talk about carb metabolism first before we get to what ketosis is. So whenever you eat carbohydrates, your body responds by releasing insulin. And that's a signal that your body says, like, uses to manage blood glucose from going too high. And insulin is a storage hormone. When insulin's elevated, your body's taking that extra glucose and it's storing it. You can't store and access fat energy at the same time. It's one or the other. Oh, just giving you oh no, this is at the beginning. I'm like, this is the end. No, don't tell them the secrets. No. Oh boy, okay. Is there a faster way to get back to my slide? Let's see if I can. I think I'm doing okay on time, so hopefully this is... Okay, one before this is what I get back to. Okay. All right, carb metabolism. Carbs are always used first, so anytime you're eating carbohydrates, the reason those are used first is because too high a blood glucose is dangerous. So your body prioritizes managing the carbohydrate level, the glucose that's in your blood, to ensure that you don't damage your body. So anytime you're eating more carbohydrates than your body can use at one time, you get this insulin signal. And I said that was a storage one. So when carbohydrates are absent in the diet, your body turns to its storage form, which is glycogen in the liver. Most people have about a 3 to 5 day supply of glycogen in their liver. And so it takes about 3 to 5 days to even get to ketosis if you're used to eating a higher carb diet. Now, when that glycogen is depleted, that's when your body can access its fat stores. And once it gets there, it turns out that when it uses fat from fuel, one of the byproducts is these ketone bodies. Now, ideally, if we're all metabolically healthy, we should be able to switch back and forth very easily between eating carbs, burning fat in between our meals, and just have this merry, nice way. That's the way our bodies are designed to work. Kids are a great example of this, especially kids that are really metabolically healthy. They can eat a higher carb, run around like crazy kids, and then in between meals, their body's going to use its fat storage. Well, we live in a world where a lot of us don't have that metabolic flexibility anymore. And, okay, I've already said this. Now, along with using fat for fuel, these ketone bodies are also an alternate fuel source. And then ketosis is what's defined as a state where your body you can measure these ketones in your blood. And the key, I have a typo here. This should be the key to ketosis is that insulin is the opposite of ketosis. So anything that elevates insulin is going to prevent ketosis, also the fat burning. And then let's go into how is this a lost metabolic state? Well, historically, carbs were pretty scarce. And then the sources that we had of them were much less concentrated sources of carbohydrates. So anybody here a wild forager and you pick wild blueberries, compare those to the ones that you can get in the store, they're 4 to 10 times as big. Now, they're not 4 to times as concentrated in vitamins and minerals, unfortunately. There are 10 times more sugars in them. Same thing I can think of just in my lifetime how apples have changed. When I was a little kid, my mom would make my lunch every day and she would put an apple in my lunch every day. Now at that time, you could get 3 kinds of apples. There was a red delicious, which was not delicious. There was a golden delicious, which was slightly delicious. Then there were Granny Smith's apples, which I thought were terrible. I know people love the sourness of it, but I was like, that's not fruit, that's sour. And I've since confessed this to my mom, but every day I would throw that apple in the garbage. I never ate it. It tasted terrible. It didn't taste good. And now we've got apples that are the size of a small child's head. And there are things like Honeycrisp, right? Like they're really concentrated in sugars. And so just in my lifetime, there's been a huge change in the amount of carbohydrates that are available in the foods that we think that are the healthiest. And I'm sure you've all seen that thing going around social media about how bananas used to be, very fibrous things with giant seeds in them now. And then the Chiquita company has bred them to be these really healthy, good sources of potassium that have tons of sugar in them, actually. And then on top of that, so the fruits and vegetables were different back then, but they were also only available seasonally and in limited quantities. So if anybody's ever gone to try to pick something wild, like we'll just stick with the blueberries, it's hard to pick like pounds and pounds of blueberries. It takes a lot of time to forage for those. And so they weren't plentiful. And it was meant to be that, a few times a year, maybe in the spring and summer, that we had an abundance of those foods. But the rest of the year, we were primarily eating fat and protein and living off our own fat stores. Now, this is a fun little fact that kind of opens people's eyes a lot of times, is that at any one time in our body, the amount of glucose that we need in our bloodstream to have a healthy, normal blood glucose is only 4 to 5 grams. So that's like a teaspoon of carbohydrate. So any time that we're consuming more than a teaspoon of carbohydrates, our body has to do something with that. It has to get rid of it. Because if that just accumulates in our blood, that's very dangerous and damaging. Also, babies are born in a mild state of ketosis, so this goes back to that metabolic flexibility that most of us are born with. And then children can easily go in and out of ketosis as well. So how did we lose it? How did we lose it? That's an Eminem song, right? Like, I'm all over the place here. So first of all, we were told that fat is bad, right? So that was the first step in losing this metabolic flexibility. Then we were told to eat 7 to 11 servings of grains a day. And then we were told, well, you need to eat every 2 to 3 hours to keep your metabolism up. Don't let your blood sugar get too low. So how many times a day now do most people eat an excessive amount of carbohydrates, more than a teaspoon? So we start out the day with a healthy smoothie, or cereal, or some whole grains, perhaps even oatmeal, and then a lot of people, maybe they skip breakfast at home, but they stop at Starbucks and get their white cinnamon dolce latte cream mocha extra sugar and a scone on the side, or maybe those cute little donuts or cake pops. And then they have a healthy lunch. They're going to go, to Subway or wherever and get, a low-fat sub with extra bread. And then most people's dinner is 3/4 carbohydrates as well. And then what happens? Oh, I missed the afternoon snack, because between 2 to 4 in the afternoon, they're crashing, so they need a pick-me-up. And then after dinner, they're just snacky, and they can't understand why they've eaten so healthy all day long. Why are they so hungry at dinner? And why do they need a snack? And just a little ice cream after dinner. So we're eating 6 to 11 or maybe even 10 times a day excessive carbs. Now, it turns out that our body really likes hormones to be pulsatile. So occasionally we're exposed to hormones, but not a steady, constant, excessive level. So insulin should be something that we're subjected to occasionally. And whenever there's an insulin, it's like an alarm in our body. Signals your cells, blood sugar's too high. Hey guys, we gotta do something. Get the sugar out, hurry up, do it now. So the cells hear that signal and they respond. But if you think of it like a fire alarm, so if right now there was a fire alarm that went off, we'd all panic, we'd very calmly walk outside, and then they gave us all clear, and we came back in and sat down, and there was another fire alarm. Kind of go, okay, I guess it's real, let's go back outside. Come back in, try to start over again, another fire alarm. Maybe at that point you'd be like, you know what, let's just keep talking. This must not really be a fire. But what if this was happening 6 to 8 times a day in your life where there's a fire alarm? You got to get work done. You start to ignore that. But what if there really was a fire every 2 to 3 hours in your life? The fire department would take more action. They would make the signal bigger. They would make flashing lights, maybe glitter bombs. They would have jumping unicorns to get your attention. No, this is real. It really is a fire. So this is what happens to our cells. They start to ignore it as well. So they're constantly bombarded with too much insulin, and so the cells start ignoring the signal. Glucose is still going up. There's still a fire alarm. There's still an emergency. So what does the body do to respond to that? The pancreas starts to make even more insulin. That's our glitter bombs and unicorns jumping. So insulin resistance is twofold. It's where the cells are ignoring the signal, and to compensate for that, the pancreas is making way too much insulin. And it turns out that the longer you've been exposed to this whole thing, the greater the degree of insulin resistance. And the body ends up, the pancreas ends up excessively secreting insulin, but it ends up being high all of the time. And because it's been doing it for so long, do the thought imagination of the fire alarm again. So what if you've been hearing a fire alarm every 2 to 3 hours for the last 10 years? How long would it take of not hearing a fire alarm before you heard one again, and then you thought, maybe that really is a fire? Would it take a year, 6 months, 2 years? That's kind of what happens in our body as well, is you've got to get the insulin down low enough for the cells to start to trust. Okay, maybe this really is a fire this time. So it takes time to heal this. And it turns out that insulin is not benign. It's actually very pro-inflammatory. So this is part of what's contributing to our state of all these inflammatory processes and all these inflammatory symptoms that we're seeing, is that people's insulin is chronically elevated, and elevated more so than it should be. So insulin resistance then results in chronic weight gain. If your insulin's high all the time, your body cannot access its fat stores. And when it can't access its fat stores, it's short on fuel. That makes you tired and hungry. So you're gaining weight and you're tired and hungry. What does that result in? Even more weight gain and more elevation of insulin. So it's a snowball effect. And of course, then we see metabolic syndrome. Do you all know what that is? Not everybody. Okay, so metabolic is a collection of symptoms that are correlated with development of diabetes and heart disease, cardiovascular disease. So there's 5 different criteria. If you have any 3 of those, you qualify for metabolic syndrome. So waist measurement is one measure. So in men, a measurement above 40 inches, and women 35 or higher. High blood pressure, hyperglycemia, so high blood sugar, and low HDL cholesterol, the good kind, and elevated triglycerides. So if you meet any 3 of those, then you have metabolic syndrome. Type 2 diabetes. Cancer is considered being looked at as a metabolic disease as well. The brain things as well. So migraines, epilepsy has already been well validated with ketogenic diet. Dementia, Alzheimer's, chronic pain, chronic fatigue as well. Endocrine issues, adrenal fatigue. That was a big thing for me that we healed. Hormonal issues as well. So it turns out when insulin is high all the time, it's giving feedback and it's putting all of the hormones out of balance. So both for men and women. So you get symptoms like PMS, PCOS, perimenopause symptoms, low testosterone in men and infertility, depression and anxiety, mental fogginess, memory, concentration, ADD. Additionally, allergies and acne. So both food allergies and environmental allergies. So some of that could be going along with the gut healing that I'm going to talk about very shortly. But also, these ketone bodies turn out they're very anti-inflammatory. I'll tell you a little bit more about that in a minute. And all kinds of digestive issues, autoimmune disease, and on and on and on. And so as I started delving into this as my specialty, and the more research I read, things really started to come together. It's like, this is why we're so sick as a society, and this is why over the last 40, 50, 60 years, our population just keeps getting more and more overweight, and we end up with more and more symptoms, more chronic disease. Why is there such an epidemic of autoimmune and allergies? All right, so let's go into the 5 key health benefits of ketosis, and then the bonus one I have for you. So number 1, ketones are a superior fuel source. So before there were the hands that went up about, well, you need carbs for energy. Well, it turns out, and these researchers back in the 70s knew this, but I never learned this in school, ketones are a 28% greater energy source than any of the other macronutrients. And on a ketogenic diet, you end up with boundless energy. So you're able to access your fat stores, which provide you a nice steady state of fuel, but then you get these ketone bodies on top of it. And if you've ever talked to anybody following ketogenic diet, anybody in here following a ketogenic diet? Oh, look at all the hands, yay. Don't people hear how great we feel and they're like, yeah, I think you're crazy, you're making it up, right? Like, oh, be quiet, stop. You're drinking the Kool-Aid, like, I don't believe it. And then you get into it and then you're like, they were right, it feels so great. This is why, partially. You don't need to eat every 2 to 3 hours now. You end up with this steady state of energy from your fat stores, and your body's perfectly happy just to keep chugging along. And even a lean person has, a long time storage of fat that they can go on. And then we're starting to see elite athletes that are making the switch over to fat burning. And so Kobe Bryant, the entire Lakers team is now switching over to a fat-burning ketogenic diet. The pro golfer, Phil Mickelson, is just a couple of examples that we're seeing. I did an interview on my YouTube series with a former Olympic athlete, and this was back in he was, I think, in the 80s, and he just himself noticed that when he ate more fat, he actually had greater performance. And this was at a time when that was not a popular notion to be talking about, so he kind of kept that to himself. But The number 2 key health benefit of ketones is they're really powerfully anti-inflammatory. So not only the ketones, but a ketogenic diet for several reasons. So I mentioned that insulin is pro-inflammatory, so we're keeping insulin nice and low. So you remove that pro-inflammatory hormone. Well, you don't remove it, but you reduce it greatly. And then, so a ketogenic diet itself then has 3 different ways that it works on reducing inflammation. That low insulin. Ketones themselves are really powerful anti-inflammatory molecules. And then also we're removing pro-inflammatory foods like grains and sugar. So you get 3 different ways that you're getting really profound reduction of inflammation. And this some of you may be like, no, I don't believe you. It's more effective than the autoimmune protocol for pain and swelling, autoimmune conditions, and cardiovascular disease because it has all these different ways that it's acting on that. I know I'll get somebody stop me in the hall and be like, you're wrong, I know you're wrong. That's okay. We're all here to learn and open your mind. So if you're a keto skeptic in here, I welcome you, and I hope that I can just give you one little grain of information that makes you open your mind just a little bit. Maybe you take your skepticism from a 99 down to a 97, maybe. Okay, so number 3 key health benefit of ketones, or ketosis, is this healing aspect. So ketones have been shown to be really powerful antioxidant molecules. And also we have an internal antioxidant system that is suppressed by insulin. So temporarily when we get those insulin spikes, or that's how it's supposed to be, turns off our body's own really powerful antioxidant system. And so if we're in a state constantly where our insulin is elevated, then we can't ever get use of that. They've also shown too that ketosis is fantastic for autophagy. So this for catching early cancerous changes, but also in just repairing worn out cells and aging. So this autophagy effect ends up being really great for anti-aging and cancer. Also tissue healing. So I have a couple quick stories about these 2 things. So the anti-aging thing was something that I didn't really know about in the beginning. I was showing my mom pictures of people's really dramatic weight loss on keto where they'd lost 100 pounds or more, and seeing the before and after pictures. And my mom was like, wow, it's really remarkable. But it's really interesting though, because they actually look younger after. And if anybody's ever had a friend that had a significant weight loss, and typically it's after like a weight loss surgery or something where it's really dramatic weight loss, and you see them the first time afterwards, and you go, ooh, you look really thin, but you can't really say they look very healthy. They look, it looks like their skin is really deflated, and people used to just think, well, that's what happens when you lose weight, is all that skin's still there and it's not filled up anymore, so it just sags. It turns out that because a lot of diets are low-fat, low-calorie diets, they don't stimulate this response. So the ketones heal all the tissues. I have another story that goes along with this. A client of mine that had been in a car accident 10 years ago that was far worse than mine. She'd broken nearly every bone in her body, pins and screws head to toe. She was spending every night of her life, so again, the accident was 10 years ago. Every night she was laying on her couch, icing her legs, taking prescription painkillers, because that's what she had to do to get through her life with the pain that she had, the chronic pain. And so about 10 weeks into ketosis, she reported to me, she says, I can't believe it. I no longer have to ice my legs every night. I'm down to only taking ibuprofen for the pain. And the thing she was most excited about was, my daughter's car broke down this weekend, and I helped her push it for a whole mile. And I didn't even have any pain the next day. It was really remarkable. We even had to push it over a curb. It was so great. So I have story after that of that, like people that have been in chronic pain. And if any of you have ever experienced chronic pain, you've tried everything. And I don't know of anything else that really works this universally and this dramatically. Additionally, the high-fat diet. So many people out there are still following a low-fat diet, and they have for decades. And they're really deficient in all of those fat-soluble vitamins. And also the essential fats. So we end up with really soft skin. For me, things like that cracked, dry heel that I had, that my mom has, that I just thought was a part of getting older, and the dry elbows, like all of that went away. Additionally, so there's no research on this, but I'm seeing anecdotal evidence of this, and there's a really strong logical hypothesis with this. So reversal of osteoporosis, which we're told you can't reverse, you just got to do the best you can at minimizing bone loss. So what do we need to be able to get our minerals in our bones? Fat-soluble vitamins, right? And if people are following a low-fat diet, they're going to be chronically deficient in these vitamins that are essential to get those nutrients into the bones. And so it's not about a lack of calcium, it's about a lack of hormonal signaling to get the minerals in there. So I've got a recent client that just a year ago, she started keto. She's 31, which is past the age that we're told that you can get any more density in your bones. She's been doing bone scans, and she's shown that over the last year that she's increased her bone density, and which is remarkable. And so I think that we'll see more and more of this, that we'll have a possible way of at least preventing this in future generations, and hopefully reversal of it in people that have it already. Number 4 benefit of a ketogenic diet and ketosis: sustainable weight loss. It's the thing that I was told and believed very strongly 4 years ago. If you would have told me I was telling people to follow a diet to lose weight, I would have called you a liar, would not have believed you. But it turns out that, like I mentioned, most diets, they make you tired and hungry and irritable. And you don't get that on a ketogenic diet. It actually is a really powerful, ketones are a very powerful anti-appetite suppressant. It even works with people that have leptin resistance, so it heals leptin resistance. It gives a metabolic advantage. There's research that came out last year that showed that they compared all the different standard diet approaches, the low fat, low carb, the zone type diet that's moderate, and a ketogenic diet. A well-formulated ketogenic diet, meaning we're not restricting fat and we're not restricting calories, was the one that caused a metabolic advantage. You actually burn more calories, and when you do that, you're not slowing your metabolism down. So it ends up being the one way that you can actually lose weight and keep it off. So all my cohort that were so afraid I was going to just ruin my metabolism, I'm going to disappoint them. You get really stable blood sugar. So what that means then is you can get rid of the cravings, the constant hunger that makes you overeat. You get rid of that hangry feeling. Number 5 key benefit of ketosis is it makes your brain really, really happy. Anybody wondered, like, why are we having this epidemic of dementia, Alzheimer's, ADD, anxiety, depression? All of these things are shown ketones to get remarkably better. So even if we give exogenous ketones to someone with Alzheimer's and dementia, you can dramatically improve their functioning immediately. So the ketones are different fuel in the brain. You've probably heard dementia or Alzheimer's referred to as type 3 diabetes or diabetes of the brain. It's because it can no longer access and utilize the glucose. So when we give it ketones as another fuel, it's like, oh, hey, you remembered. I forgot. I thought you'd never give me those again. Then the brain's like, yay, finally we can function because you haven't worn out those pathways. And we're seeing as well anecdotally, as well as research shows too, that ketones are a really potent anxiolytic. So we're getting rid of anxiety and depression. One of the things universally that my clients report is that they just feel this sense of calm and peace for the first time in perhaps their lives, especially the ladies that I work with that are chronically struggling with their weight. They finally feel at calm and peace with both food and their body. So here's my bonus ketone benefit just for you all in this conference is a happy gut. So there's 4 different ways that a ketogenic diet makes your gut really happy. So one is, and I'm going to dive in just a little bit deeper in each of these. One is the anti-inflammatory component. We talked about that as well, but I've got another one as well to talk about. It allows your GI tract to get a rest. It promotes the tissue healing, and it provides optimal food for our gut bacteria. So before I go into each of those just a little bit more, let's talk about butyric acid. How many of you have heard of butyric acid? Yes? I told you about this yesterday. You should know this. It's often abbreviated BTA. It is a short-chain fatty acid. It's found in ghee. Butter is 3 to 4% butyric acid. It's also in butter oil. This is thought to be, perhaps some people speculate that Weston Price's special oil that he gave people, that maybe it was this butyric acid that was having such a good benefit for them. And it's also abundant in animal fats. Additionally, our gut bacteria makes butyric acid. It makes it when it ferments fiber, especially from leafy greens. And the cells of our GI tract, their preferred fuel is actually butyric acid. So maybe you're starting to see a glimpse into maybe this might be a good thing. So the anti-inflammatory part, we've talked about how a ketogenic diet in general is anti-inflammatory. So you get those ketones, the lowered insulin, eliminating the inflammatory grains and sugars. But also a ketogenic diet is a great source of butyric acid. Eating more butter, these animal fats, possibly ghee. And then we're eating vegetables that feed our gut bacteria and allow them to make that butyric acid. And studies show that this butyric acid has broad anti-inflammatory effects, including improving the immune function. Now, my 6B is that it gives your GI tract a rest. So with the stabilized blood sugar on a ketogenic diet and the fact that running on fat now instead of carbohydrates, it dramatically decreases appetite, and people just naturally reduce the amount of times they're eating per day. So anytime you're not eating, you get to have a little rest in your GI. Historically, up until the last, how long has it been now? I would say 30 years, we haven't eaten every 2 to 3 hours. I mean, think back to your grandparents. How many times a day did they eat? Were they trying to eat every 2 to 3 hours to keep their metabolism up? So intermittent fasting ends up being a natural byproduct of ketosis. You're just not hungry very much anymore. And so you end up naturally with more time that your GI tract gets to rest. And then it also, once you're in ketosis, anybody ever tried to do a longer term fast with a client that really could benefit from it, but they couldn't stick with it because they felt so miserable the first day or two? It turns out that once you're in ketosis, then it makes longer term fasts of 5, 7, 10 days or even longer much easier. And so you can get even more healing. So part 3 of my number 6 is then this tissue healing. So we talked about ketones being really potent healing molecules. And because we're getting to rest the digestive tract, it's going to be able to heal the butyric acid as well. It turns out that multiple studies show the butyric acid is great for colon cancer prevention and treatment. And that's actually because it's looking at the promotion of apoptosis. And then like with the ketones, you're getting the autophagy as well. All right, 6D is, like I've already mentioned briefly, is that we're providing our bacteria and our gut with optimal fuel. The keto diet provides both butyric acid from the foods, but also we're eating vegetables that are promoting our bacteria from making that themselves. And and then the small intestine, all of our enterocytes, their preferred fuel source is this butyric acid. So very quickly, I've got a little bit left, so I'm going to go over the basics of a well-formulated ketogenic diet. So what does it look like clinically? First, we got to talk about very briefly the difference between starvation ketosis and a well-formulated ketogenic diet, or what we also call nutritional ketosis. So if you go without food long enough, you will go into ketosis. And so if you're on a desert island and you're only eating coconuts, and if you can't eat enough of them, you're going to go into starvation ketosis. Nutritional ketosis, or a well-formulated ketogenic diet, is one where you're eating in a way that allows your body to go into ketosis. There tends to be a big difference between that. One is starvation ketosis, you're not getting any nutrients. And if you're eating a high-carb diet, you're going to get more insulin spikes as well. So you may be able to go into ketosis occasionally on a low-fat, low-calorie diet, but you're not going to get all the benefits of a well-formulated ketogenic diet. And it turns out that this well-formulated, again, which means not calorie restricted and not fat restricted, is what gives you that metabolic advantage and doesn't slow down the metabolism. there are ketogenic approaches out there that say, all the time I talk to people on the phone, they're like, oh, I've been following ketogenic diet, I've been on HCG, or I've been on ideal protein or something like that. And it's like, well, unfortunately, that's not a well-formulated ketogenic diet, and that isn't well known out there. So just know that you don't want to do a low-fat, and you don't want to restrict calories. And so here's my shortcut to what it looks like our macros, so fats, proteins, and carbs. I start everybody at 20 grams or less per day of carbohydrates. Protein, the easy way is for women to do about 60 to 80 grams per day and men 75 to 90. And fat ends up being about 60 to 90% of calories from fat. And you end up eating full fat foods and then just adding fat to your food to satiety. So fat is your leverage there. Salt is one of the most important parts of a ketogenic diet that most people don't even know about. In a state of ketosis, it's a pretty strong diuretic effect in the body. Every time you're urinating, you're losing a little bit of salt as well. And so it ends up being essential that you supplement with salt. You can't get enough just from your food. No matter how much people think they're adding to their food, it's not going to be enough. So it ends up being essential that you add 4 to 5 grams of sodium per day. Now, grams of sodium is not the same as grams of sodium chloride, which is table salt. So this ends up being about 1 to 2 teaspoons of additional supplemented salt per day. People aren't doing this. They're ended up with things like headaches and fatigue and lightheadedness and dizziness. Constipation as well is another side effect when you're not getting enough salt. And the approach needs to be adjusted to the degree of insulin resistance. And so for some people that I work with, we have to go even lower on carbs and even lower on protein. Some people, though, can tolerate a much higher carbohydrate limit and be able to be in ketosis. So it has to be adjusted. And then for some people as well, we start to work with leverage tools like intermittent fasting and longer fastings if severe. All right, so clinical applications. I'm going to buzz through this. So basically everything before that I said was a cause of insulin resistance. All of those are really good for treating things to treat with a ketogenic diet. All the common ills. Contraindications, though, is a little bit more, I'll pause on this a little bit more. Contraindications, so somebody with orthorexia, somebody who has a lean body weight, they're already obsessed with doing everything perfect and right, and they're going to hot yoga an hour a day, and they're exercising 2 more hours every day, and they're tired and stressed out, and they want to do a ketogenic diet because they heard it's really good, it's going to prevent cancer. Those people are not going to feel very good on a ketogenic diet because their body is already really stressed out. Somebody with an active eating disorder, now the key here is active. I have worked with people that are working with a therapist, they're in recovery from their eating disorder. This ends up working really well because it takes away that blood sugar roller coaster that causes a lot of excessive appetite, which they're trying to compensate for with their eating disorder. Anyone who's looking for the latest fad diet and just wants a quick fix, let me just do this for a few weeks, lose the weight really quick, and then I'll just go back to what I'm doing. That also isn't a really good fit for this as well. This is a therapeutic diet. This is something that people are using to heal this insulin resistance. It's not just, oh, hey, this sounds great. I just need to take off this 5 pounds I put on the last year. Let's do this. Also, somebody with a history of binging, but also people that go into it and think they can just cheat every once in a while. Those insulin spikes from those cheats, those binges, can put people at serious risk for gallstones, kidney stones, and pancreatitis. And it's just because it's such a huge insulin spike at one time. Now, those are things that I would not recommend somebody follow a ketogenic diet. Now, here's a precaution. So these are things that if anybody has these, they should work with a qualified healthcare provider. History of eating disorder. Active or history of gallstones. Doesn't mean that they can't do it. Also, the history of kidney stones, gout, IBS or IBD may need some extra help. Ulcerative colitis, which can get better on keto, also needs some special help too. And anybody taking any medications, especially medications for hypertension or diabetes. This doesn't mean that they can't do it. In fact, those things get well really quickly, but it turns out that ketogenic affects so fast that, for example, somebody taking any insulin, typically the first day on a ketogenic diet, they get to cut that in half. That's how potent it is. And the same thing with weaning off of blood pressure medication, that needs to be monitored too. All right, I'm getting the wheelie ball. I just have 2 slides left, so I'll just, all right, so if you're ready for more, how I can help. I told you at the very beginning that I was going to teach you as much as I could in this hour that we have together, and I hope you feel like I've taught you as much as I possibly could in an hour. And so let's continue the conversation. If you want to know more, if you have questions for me, I don't know that if we have a minute or 2 left, we might have time for 1 or 2 questions. But my son and I are going to have a table over in the exhibitor hall. So starting tonight, I think it opens at 5, and then all weekend we're going to be there. So come talk to me, I have a free 7-day meal plan that you can sign up for just to get a sample and see what it's like, as well as for people that want to take this further, I'm offering a phone consult. And so we have a way that you can sign up for that and get some time to talk to me one-on-one about implementing keto diet for yourself. So did I miss anything? Yeah. All right, I think that's it. Are we?
We could probably take 1 question.
Okay.
It looks like we do have 1 question.
Perfect. You are lucky.
I actually have a client with CRPS, and he really does not believe that diet can have anything to do with this. Is there any research or anything you could give me to help convince him?
I don't know of any research on it, and I can tell you that, so I have 2 aunts with CRPS, and I knew going into the accident or after the accident when my symptoms were coming up, I was like, oh no, like I don't want that. They're both disabled, like this is disabling, it's chronic, it's progressive, it just gets worse and worse. It's chronic regional pain syndrome. So yeah, it's and the doctors that I was seeing, they figured out, what it was, so they referred me to the pain specialist, and I made the dietary change after I started seeing him. And, within days, the symptoms were subsiding. And so then going back to the doctor, they're like, yeah, I don't care what you're eating, although that sounds really dangerous and bad for you because you should eat a vegan diet. But yeah, so you probably just never even had that in the first place because that doesn't get better. So unfortunately, there's no research on it. And I would, if I had 2 of me, I would love one person to go and do that research.
Does one of maybe your blog posts or one of your podcasts have that information, or your story at least?
Yeah, I blog. So when I first started keto and coming out of the closet, every month I did a blog post for the first year. And so if you want to find, my table, or, we can talk in the hall right after this too, and I can give you, how you can get that blog. But I've got 12 of those, and that chronicles the reversal of that. But for somebody who's got that pain, I know that's hard for them to believe because this pain syndrome is considered to be the worst pain that anybody could experience at all, ever. Like the scale of pain, like theirs is higher than what the scale of pain is. And so it's hard for them to believe that they could, they felt a victim to their condition for so long that they just feel like you don't understand, there's nothing you can do for this.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Hello.
Hi.
Do you know anything about the product Prove It, which promises to put you into ketosis?
Have I heard of it?
Yes.
I get approached every day that I should sell it, yes. It's a multi-level marketing company that sells an exogenous ketone supplement. Let's see if I can make a good analogy of it. So it can give people the experience of being in ketosis that aren't following ketogenic diet. So it infuses your blood with ketones so that your brain gets that boost immediately. It has therapeutic application for people that are trying to treat cancer, Alzheimer's, dementia, things like that, perhaps epilepsy. But the thing is if you're following a ketogenic diet, your body is already making its own ketones. So adding more ketones doesn't add any more benefit, and in fact, it actually is counterproductive. The thing that a lot of people don't realize is that the same thing that regulates your blood sugar from going too high is what regulates your ketones from going too high. So too high of ketones is ketoacidosis. The way that our body regulates them is that it releases insulin. So if you're already in ketosis and you add more ketones on top of that, guess what happens? Your body releases insulin to keep it from going too high. So your whole goal of a ketogenic diet is to reduce insulin, and you're trying to add this supplement on top of what you're already doing, and all you're doing is causing an insulin release. So not only are they unnecessary, they're counter-beneficial, and they're really expensive. It's like $5 a glass for these things a day. So I have a video review of one. I was sent another company of that. So
This will be the last question.
What's the best question?
what's the best question?
So I work with a lot of kids with autism who are allergic to both dairy and eggs, and that's not happening. So talk to me about a ketogenic diet, dairy-free, egg-free.
Yeah, I love that question. So on the one hand, there is a whole world of foods out there that are not eggs and dairy, especially a lot of the traditional animal foods and organ meats and things like that, and chicken hearts, and there's a whole world of foods out there that are not eggs and dairy. So that ends up being totally doable. But the other thing that is really exciting that I'm seeing is that because of all the health benefits I talked about with the GI, is that people on a ketogenic diet, they no longer react. They're no longer allergic or sensitive to those foods that they previously were. My son is a really good example of this. He's a little embarrassed, but he also likes the attention, so no. He used to have, all through middle school and into high school, just really severe cystic acne. This is pre-keto. We discovered that when he avoided dairy, it went away. He still had considerable surface acne, but the cystic acne went away. So when he started keto, I said, you know, what I'm seeing is that people don't react. If you want to try keeping dairy in so you just feel like you have more choices. And he went periods of time without it just to see what would happen. But here he is now. It's about 1.5 years that he's been on keto. And you can check out his skin. Like, not only is the... Not only is the cystic acne completely gone, all of the surface acne is there. And I can tell you, I don't know anybody who consumes more dairy than he does now. In fact, this morning in his coffee, he had an entire cup of heavy cream, cheese and omelet with cheese and all that kind of stuff. So that's the exciting part, is that we're actually seeing, you know, instead of people being allergic to 10 things and then they're allergic to 10 more next year, is that no longer they're allergic to those things. So, yeah, great question.